That's that. After 5 appearances across 3 ensemble movies and 2 solo features, Spider-Man has left the building of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was a fun ride, but while Marvel fans protest and start leaving their own memorials as Spider-Man's tenure comes to a close, RIP in peace, would it really be all that controversial to say that maybe, just maybe, this might actually kind of be a good thing? Hey, come on, give me a chance. Look, no one needs reminding of the state of Spider-Man's movies just before he was absorbed into the MCU. Mark Webb's Amazing Spidey films were a sad attempt at mounting a challenge to the MCU with a needlessly interconnected cinematic universe. And while they did have their positives, they failed to live up to the quality of the character's earlier silver screen adventures, brought to life by Sam Raimi between 2002 and 2007. Irrespective of Sony's inability to get Spidey right on the second go, however, now should be a time to take stock of where the character is, and what exactly the studio's divorce of Marvel means to the property going forward. This means considering both the positives and the negatives. So, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are 10 positives behind Spider-Man leaving the MCU. Number 10. Peter can come home. Spider-Man Far From Home was a fine Marvel film that provided a new twist on Mysterio, included some great revelations to the wider MCU, and nailed the relationship between Peter Parker and MJ. It also found success in taking Spidey out of his comfort zone, showcasing several European locales as Peter attempted to recover from the fallout of the blip brought on by Thanos' conquest. At the end of the sequel, just before the 2 ridiculous and yet oh so brilliant post-credit sequences, audiences got to see Peter swinging through New York City, laying claim to his rightful position as the Big Apple's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It invoked the memory of those older Spidey films and brought the character back to his most iconic activity and setting, web-slinging in New York. It felt familiar, homely even. For the most part, we've never really gotten that with the MCU Spider-Man. That's partially because Peter is a young high schooler in this case, and so we get to see him swing as best he can through Queens, but instantly afterwards he was doing battle with the Avengers in Leipzig, battling Thanos and Titan, and then stopping Mysterio above London's Tower Bridge. The third film, meanwhile, looks set to stay in New York, and that's made much easier without the rest of the MCU to worry about. Number 9. Spider-Man shouldn't be an Avenger. Not yet. When rebooting Spider-Man for the second time around, Sony and Marvel Studios made the only choice they could and settled on depicting the web-slinger as a young high schooler, as he was in his earliest comics. It fit the context of the MCU in that it explained why Spidey hadn't appeared up until Civil War, and allowed both studios to try something a little different by showcasing a genuinely young version of the character. Equally though, there was no way this version wouldn't get involved with the Avengers at some stage following his introduction. Marvel got to have loads of interesting commentary on Peter being too young to have so much responsibility, and it was a refreshing angle to take. But that's also why it makes sense for the character to take a step back from the wider Marvel universe, even if it's happened for non-storytelling reasons. No Marvel Studios means no Avengers, and Spidey, now a fugitive, has to figure out his own path without his superhero buddies. Sure, it's going to be a little weird seeing the next film struggle to address the logic in Peter not reaching out to the Avengers in the event of a serious catastrophe, but he's not ready to be an Avenger anyway. Not yet. Number 8. The Iron Man connection is finished. Iron Man's relationship with Spider-Man was something of a double-edged sword for the MCU. On one hand, it was great to see Stark as a mentor and Peter as the kid obviously eager to impress him. It also managed to cleverly subvert the Uncle Ben expectation with Stark's passing in Avengers Endgame 2, adding a heart-wrenching dynamic to Iron Man's final act on the silver screen. On the other, Robert Downey Jr.'s character largely overshadowed Peter everywhere he went, to the point where it's actually possible to argue that both of Tom Holland's solo Spidey films were pretty much all about Tony's legacy. Any future Spider-Man film that brings back Vulture or picks up where Mysterio left off is going to have a problem on its hands when it comes to their respective motivations. But for Peter specifically, having him move on from his old mentor could be a major boost. For all that the new Spider-Man films have been able to try something new, they've also pushed integral aspects of the character to the back burner. His relationship with Aunt May, his wider supporting cast, and even his own working-class background have all been pushed to the periphery. That can all change without the MCU to think about, and the character would be much better for it. Number 7. It can have a more streamlined focus. The old criticism that the MCU is more concerned with having each film set up a sequel with references aplenty is just as bogus today as it was when first optioned in Iron Man 2. That being said, there is something to be said about how certain characters could actually benefit from not having to worry about world building from start to finish. Take Daredevil, for instance. While fans have quite rightly lamented over the fact the character's Netflix show never possessed any meaningful ties with the MCU, the restrictions placed on the TV format enabled the series showrunners to produce a spectacular streamlined adaptation that stands today as one of the finest Marvel projects to date. It did that by focusing on Daredevil and Daredevil's world alone, as a street-level hero in Hell's Kitchen. With Spider-Man covering twice as much ground as the Man Without Fear, that should mean there's still plenty to work with. Number 6. Yes, a Venom crossover will be hilarious and amazing. Look, we live in a post-Venom world, and it's time we all embraced it. Sony and Tom Hardy's first Spider-Man spin-off suffered a mauling from critics but became a major box office success, grossing over $850 million in total. It quickly developed a cult following, and while that sometimes must be said that we all laugh at, and not with the Ruben Fleischer feature, there's no denying it's good watching. Plus, have you seen those adorable Chinese adverts for Venom being the ideal boyfriend? It literally could not get any better. Even before Sony and Marvel's deal came to a close, it was rumored that Tom Holland would appear in Venom as Spider-Man, opening the door to the character appearing in the MCU, and with them the rest of Sony's universe of Marvel characters. Now that crossover seems pretty much like a foregone conclusion, and if the thought of Tom Holland and Hardy teaming up to fight Woody Harrelson in a wig as Carnage doesn't set your mind on fire, are you even alive? It'll be gloriously messy, and will likely boast an appalling tie-in song from Eminem to match. Just, don't invite Jared. He's weird. Number 5. Spider-Verse proved Sony can make incredible stories. Although it could be argued that this is a case of putting X and Y together and coming up with 616, audiences shouldn't underestimate Sony. The studio delivered a seminal animated offering with last year's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a film that is, by all accounts, probably the greatest comic book movie of all time. Sony did that. Sony! Spider-Verse succeeded in part because of its own medium. The animation on display was breathtaking, detailed, and unlike anything viewers had ever really seen. But it also illustrated an immense understanding of Spider-Man as a whole, exploring what the character has meant to readers since his introduction in 1962, and also how they've grown since. Likewise, MCU fans would do well to remind themselves of how great Sam Raimi's first 2 films were. There's been a trend to denounce them as corny and dated in recent years, but isn't it obvious that was the whole point in the first place? They're a brilliant representation of Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Jerry Conway, and John Romita's original comics. And though Sony effectively impeded the third film with their own wishes to see Venom, they're also not the same studio they were in the mid-noughties. Number 4. There's no worry villains and allies will be wasted. Back when Sony and Marvel still had their deal, there was a general worry that the former studio were going to waste all of Spidey's best villains in their own contrived spin-off productions. There was talk of there even being a Kraven solo movie, because of course there was, which threatened to set a precedent where other beloved Spidey villains would never get to share the silver screen with Holland in the MCU. Silver Sable, Black Cat, and Silk are all confirmed to be getting their own spin-off films too, and while they could all certainly exist on their own, there's now a chance they get to team up with Tom Holland's Peter as well. Granted, this wouldn't have been an issue if Sony weren't so keen to capitalize on Spidey's MCU popularity with their own efforts, but it's something to consider all the same. Number 3. Disney tried to have their cake and eat it. Batting for big business makes no sense, and it's partially why the discourse surrounding Spider-Man's exit from the MCU has grown so tedious so rapidly. Championing either studio over the spat is effectively like assuming the Ken Watanabe role in Godzilla, exclaiming "let them fight" as the 2 kaiju lay waste to civilization. It means nothing. That said, there is a point to be made about Disney's conduct during these negotiations. If Sony are indeed telling the truth, it sounds as though the Mouse House tried to cross a bridge too far, attempting to change the structure so that the films were financed 50-50 and that the 2 studios would split the box office gross that way too. It might not seem too unreasonable at a glance, but factor in the point that Disney stand to make millions off of merchandising alone, and it's easy to see why Sony deemed it an unreasonable request. Number 2. There will be more time to focus on the supporting cast. By far, one of the best things about the latest on-screen incarnation of Spider-Man has been the supporting cast. Marissa Tomei is a fantastic Aunt May, Jacob Batalon is awesome as Ned Leeds, and then there's of course Zendaya's MJ too. Factor in the other students, and it's actually fair to say that the last 2 Spidey films have given us our best look yet at Peter Parker's high school years. However, with all that considered, not every character has received as much focus as they probably should have. Tomei's May, while brilliant, has only had a select few scenes to really bond with Peter, while key staples of Spidey's cast like Harry Osborn and the folks at the Daily Bugle are yet to appear either. Without having to worry about the Avengers, phone calls from Nick Fury, or other similar world-ending events, Sony should, in theory, be able to devote more time to those other characters, and spring for a slightly more authentic representation of Spidey's comics in the process. Number 1. Far From Home's genius ending still counts. Spider-Man Far From Home's ending, or to be specific, its mid-credit zinger, was mind-blowing. Not only did the film find a way to bring back J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, it also decided to end on a note that left Spider-Man a fugitive, and with his secret identity exposed to the world. It's sort of a double-edged sword, as the chance for Peter to actually engage with more traditional NY-based adventures has effectively been scuppered by the twist, but there's definitely more good than bad. Everyone in New York is looking for him, promising a Ferris Bueller meets John Wick 3 type adventure in the threequel. What could possibly be better than that? Although it may not seem it at first, Far From Home's ending may even serve an MCU-less Spider-Man better than one still tied to that continuity. There's no worry about other heroes having to come in and crash the web-slinger's party, while there's plenty of potential for a veritable who's who of Spidey's rogues gallery to cameo as figures trying to cash in on the bounty. Factor in the return of JJ, Far From Home's writers, Holland, and the sheer brilliance of the cliffhanger itself, and the lack of any tangible connections with the MCU soon becomes negligible.